Hi, welcome. Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm looking at you, looking at you, I'm looking at everybody. Tonight we're very happy to have with us artists in residence, in artists in retreat. Sorry, we did a we did in residence. We did a residence in Blekinge. My bad. And they will present the outcome of their research and the retreat with us tonight. So it's both a presentation, a reading, and a workshop. I will just now give you the mic. Venya, thank you so much for being here. And we're also live, and this will be also recorded if people want to access it afterwards. It'll be made available later on. Thank you.
Well, so thank you for coming. We will try to make the most pleasurable journey into our project for you. And for the ones there that will see this, maybe Zoom when they drop in, if they drop in, or afterwards on some platform. Also have a pleasurable time. So first of all, this project is called Artists in Retreat, and it's sort of a residency project. It takes different shape every year in Blekinge. It's one of the smallest Swedish regions in south of Sweden. And I have to say thank you, and I want to say thank you to the sponsors and region of Blekinge and municipality of Karlskrona and the art foundation Konst i Blekinge, which means art in Blekinge. And it feels like the last years I've been working with these people, but it's been the last year. But somehow it feels like it's been forever because, I don't know, COVID and stuff. And we did this project that we sort of called Birds Don't Take the Train, but we do. So we went to Blekinge during the fall and just explored each other's practice, their surroundings, and saw what we can do with it. And simultaneously, we built the website that sort of turned into an archive of the experience while it happened. And now we have the box, the beautiful box, which is sort of the website in a material form. But let's go around and all of us sort of talks a little bit about the experience. I'll send it to you first, and I can do last.
Okay. Well, thank you. My name is Elisa, for those who don't know it. Last summer, I think, Xenia invited me to think with her about this residency that at that time didn't have yet a form. And yeah, we used to start in like making some imaginations about what this could be, and Xenia from the beginning had really clear that this was all meant to be around friendship and meaningful connections between artists, rather than focus on the productive side of what is normally an artist project or residency. No? So that's why I think the project is called Artists in Retreat, and the main idea she had was that we would gather in this little house in the southern archipelago of Blekinge, and we will share, get to know each other, and make some develop together the project. So for me, what was very interesting, it was not, oh yeah, now we can spend a nice week in Blekinge, but it was more like, okay, I have now the opportunity to contribute to generate a whole new project together from the beginning. And that was super exciting for me, because it meant that all the stages it was not a curated residency, but more like a co-created residency. And that is something I often look forward in my practice and in my daily life. I like to co-create stuff with people, and I like to make things work that way as well. So that was very challenging and exciting, not challenging, more like exciting, because it was very pleasurable. And then, yeah, it was super nice from that perspective. And then from the artistic point of view, maybe, I was working at that time with ceramics, with porous ceramics that could filter and infiltrate water as if it was information. So I thought, okay, maybe I can do a little experiment, very low-key, kind of crafty, but I think it worked beautifully. And I took one of my little ceramic vases, very a little tiny piece. And when we were actually there, I forgot to say that Xenia assigned all of us an island from the archipelago, no? So my island was Tomto. And then it's an island that it is also a peninsula. Depending on the time of the year and the tides, you can access to the island or you cannot, because the water comes around and then you cannot walk anymore. So when we were actually there, it was an island and not a peninsula, so I couldn't go there and explore. And I decided to bury my little ceramic jar in the middle of the tongue of water that was not enabling the path that way, no? And then I marked it with a little cord, and then we marked together the coordinates, and we left it there. And then Xenia's dad, a few weeks ago, went there and rescued it, and it had the most amazing colors. It had absorbed from actually the whole autumn and winter and spring, and all the water going up and down. And for me, that worked really as an archival of that time. A little bit like the box and the website we built together is also a collaborative archive of what we did. Yeah. Serene?
The camera. So, I'm Serene. Nice to meet you. Well, then actually in this group we're 6 people, but I'm actually the only one who didn't really travel to Sweden. So actually I kind of imagined the whole thing, and through looking at photos and the recordings and conversations, I completed the trip in my mind, like entirely. So I actually, well, but I love this idea in the very beginning. It was last summer, I guess, when you mentioned this. And because many years ago, I kind of stayed a little bit in Sweden during Bachelor, almost 10 years ago from now. But I always wanted to travel there to see. But I kind of imagined what I knew, like very little information that I have about Sweden. And it was it was not planned that I didn't go, but I was I was traveling back in Hong Kong last year, and I kind of got stuck in between, so I couldn't join them. And I completed the trip on Google Maps in photos and in text, basically, because the region, there's actually not too much information, and most of them, even if you search on Google, they're in Swedish. So basically I was a little bit frustrated in the beginning. I was like, yeah, I don't really know what I can do, but actually at the end, what I found out, especially after all the materials that they have collected and shared, I realized there's something is very I did a very interesting practices, which later we'll also talk about the drawings that you see. There's a hint. So they are actually stone carvings that nobody actually knows exactly what they are. But then later on we'll mention a little bit about a kind of fish. And this kind of speculative imagination, I later on, with hindsight, I realized that what I was doing there in one day was very similar, because on the day that they were meant to travel, because you're 1 week there, so each day they kind of make an excursion to an island of each person's assigned location. And then on that day I couldn't go physically, but then I went to another island that I picked in Hong Kong, which I found it is also like a heritage site, and I thought I can go physically to another space and imagine something that would happen there, and maybe from there I can build another narrative completely. And so that's why I went on a small, well, I mean, Hong Kong is not big, and it's just like an hour trip from how do you call northeast in Hong Kong. And I take a ferry, like a little boat, and I went on a hike. And well, it's completely not what I guess you'll see in Sweden. But something is, I guess it's more like the feeling and because I think I was reading one text from one of you guys that you're on a picnic and also you're kind of walking into the water and all that. And I was exactly doing the same during that day. And yeah, I don't know, I found it's like a parallel world existing between two places. But at some point I was a bit upset because I couldn't join. But then at the end I was also thinking, does it really matter if I was there or not? Because I kind of enjoy this being a bit out of the circle and watch everything with like yeah, I was completely not in all the conversations, but then I know exactly what you're doing, and I also know it's like you have a bird's view, and you look at the whole thing, and still at the end, I'm still here, and you didn't kick me out, and I'm very grateful. And that's why, and I also really enjoyed making this. Can I say it? This booklet, because I think this is the closest moment that I feel, because these are all the reflexive texts that we wrote after the trip. And it's actually from these texts that I know what you guys, some details that I don't really understand when you're talking on WhatsApp or like images that I see on Google Drive. But then after I read all this text, and I was like, I remember that day you went to the museum and you see this. The most thing that I regret is that little dog, because they went to an archive of a museum in the region, and then they got to see the archive and materials that the museum stored. And there's one dog, a bone dog of a very, how long ago, like 1,000 years old doggy, and the yeah, stone age material artifact that they actually really kept it very nicely in a box. It was like yeah, it's like the most precious thing that I've ever seen. I was super impressed when we had one meeting with the director of the museum, and when he showed us this thing, I was like, this is the thing that I missed a lot. And it's like, yeah, I don't know. I am very this is the thing that I really wanted to see in real. But I also slowly I recommend Haven's text, because I actually her text is about this dog in a large part. And when I made this booklet, I put a little image, and I meant, well, I kind of hide it a little bit. So if you see the image, you can find details of this stone that I try to put in the design. I guess that's it. Then we can talk more later when we go to the drawings.
Yes. I don't see you, everybody, guys. Well, I will try to make my best. Hi, everybody. I'm Victoria, Vicky. You can call me whatever. Of both. And actually, I joined. Actually, I joined this group also in the summer, but it was very funny because I only had met Shania one time by then, because I've been very long friend, like a long friend from Elisa, from our times in Spain, but I really didn't know the group because all of them, they are studying a master here in The Hague, and I normally actually live in Utrecht. So my experience has been a little bit like being, of course, part of the group, but also not as far as as Serene, but I've been also a little bit like in the surroundings, which also creates a new, like a different experience from the rest, I can imagine. But actually, in the period that we went to the residency, it was very interesting because I was having a really collapse actually in my personally, because of mental struggles and anxiety actually. And it was precisely the week before that I really had to quit a lot of things that I was dealing in that moment with, like my job, the master I was studying in Utrecht, and then we went to the residency. So for me, it was a moment of literal artist in retreat. Like, I think that there was nothing as retreat as that was. I was absolutely in a blank in my brain, and I was actually like, okay, just normally I'm a really brainy person, but since I couldn't use my brain in that period, I was like, let's just feel what I can perceive in this archipelago. And I have to say that um, it was a very magical experience in a way, because first, I come from a place in Spain that it's not very green, and it's not very natural either, and then to arrive to this region when everything was in this week of autumn that is just before the actual fall of the leaves, so everything was in the most wild greens and oranges and browns, and in general all the mud or all the smells that you could feel, like what the air was so breathable that I really felt that I was traveling to the middle of the autumn in that period. And then I was actually assigned one island that was very interesting because it was also peripheral. And it was an island that was famous for being, it's called Langoren. And it was an old pilot's area, island. But in that period, it was absolutely empty of people. There was nobody. It felt like a recreational space that had been emptied and just shut off because the season had just ended. Also, the pandemic was happening, and I had the feeling that it was a bit like the echoes of what I was actually struggling with, and then suddenly I saw this kind of emptiness there, and that was so vast. But also there was these bunkers all around this island that contrasted with this beautiful landscape that were speaking about the Cold War and the fact that the Russian threat, I think it was Russian threat, was a fear that had created, in a way, these infrastructures that never had been used for an actual war, but they were there, which made me relate a lot in a way of these kind of fears that actually block your mind, and it was literally what I was dealing with. So in a way, I resonated a lot with that. And in the end, the outcome of this period was, well, apart from the reflective text and helping in general with all the things that we had to deal with, I created one of the houses that you can see some there. They are complicated to build up. If you have like a really a long afternoon with you and you want to build them and spend some mindful time just doing some craft that don't require to actually think, but just enjoy to do a very handy activity. There's a handful of them. You can get one for free. But but this is somehow like the kind of thing that I normally don't allow myself to do, and I think that we should do a little bit more in art. Just find the pleasure to be doing something, to actually enjoy it, maybe. And yeah, we can reflect, right? But in the end, it's about having fun and sharing with others. So, will arrive.
Is it long enough? I will come. No, it's okay. Yes, hello, my name is Rosa. If I think back to the period, I mainly also wrote it in a text that was in the beginning of the year, but I still feel it that way, that it feels very close and very far at the same time. And Serene was saying that she felt like she was in sort of a parallel universe, but to me it also feels a bit that this region or this place is in a parallel universe, because I think we went with the bus and then we went with the train, Elisa and me at the same time, and it's like we could all together now go to a station, take a bus and take a train and arrive there. So it's sort of in the possibilities, but you never normally do it. So it feels like it's there, but and very close, but also very far away, in a way. Yeah, and there were more moments, I think, for a lot of us in the text. It's a lot about time and how we experience time. Also, all the stuff we did was in a certain order, but if I think back, everything is sort of mixed up, and I'm not sure which island we did what anymore, and they are sort of melted together, I think, in a way. All the dinners are melted together, the small elements we repeated, they were in a specific order, but in my mind they are just sort of, yeah, one big, yeah, just maybe one experience with a lot of facets. Also, there was a lot of anticipation for my island, and I wasn't sure if we were gonna go. We went in the end the last day before we left the region again, and we went with a rowing boat, which also I will wait a little bit. Everything. I think the rowing boat again says something about time, that when you row, you go backwards to the future, and you look back to where you came from, and I think that's, yeah, it sort of suits the experience as well. Yeah, so like I said, it feels very close and very far, and like a lot has happened, but that in a way we could go again, and it would be different, but it would also be the same. So similarities in sort of sameness. Yeah, I think that's. Do we have more? Mm, maybe I took quite a lot of video material as well, and I think it's sort of it's now then part of the archive, and I think that's very nice that this experience and this place has become part of the archive that I have, and I feel it's also in at least for me, that's again something with time, that it's now part of the past, and it's sort of a shared past which we didn't have before, and I think a lot of us, we knew each other but not in this way, so it was sort of a very fast bonding experience, and then going, yeah, so very close and then going outwards again. mm, yeah, that's all I have to say.
Yeah. Hello, I'm Hevan. Mm, yes, I really appreciate to be here together in beautiful day. And Xenia introduced the the landscapes in Sweden. For example, Hastorman, yeah, where they have the places you cannot take a picture because it's military spaces, and my arts and my works is related with that scenery, so I really interested in that. So yeah, we ate together, we traveled together, but yeah, maybe I could read my text in the publication. Yeah, we visited the Blanking Museum's stories. The museum has an archived local culture as a project by collecting all kinds of household items, furnitures, textiles, paintings, ships, and so on. And Christopher of the Blanking Museum said that the collections vary slightly depending on the person in charge of the collection. Numerous boats and hunting tools were part of the collection. The many tools for fishing eels showed that eel fishing is important for them. In this reason, the day before we went to Hosterland, a petroglyph from the Bronze Age. If you walk along the Rush Forest Road, you will find wide and flat rocks like that. And then, yeah, the rock carving had been painted red to make them more visible for tourists. in the written text on the information board, it says that this is a place of ceremonies and it describes their belief in the magnificent gods and their conflicts in the ocean. However, we found the possibility that the drawings depicted would be different from this interpretation. The point is that the site could be had been used as an eel market or as a teaching place as the figures resemble the different tools for catching eels and seem to depict an eel themselves rather than a spiritual creature, a sort of worm that carries the sun across the sky. On the bus going back to our basement, Aliza raised the possibility by comparing pictures, and I followed to draw the red lines on the drawings and imagined what it is. What was the someone who drew these drawings trying to express and live? I understood that this drawing depicted detailed instruction on how to catch eels because in Korea people also like to eat eels. So I felt familiar with the culture. This made me imagine several scenes as past experiences overlapped with the drawing. And we talked together and said that some of the history related with this may have to be changed. History and culture often remain scared and unique, but the daily life of the past might also remain as a spiritual symbol. And then we imagine it might make the people of future come here. When you do art, you go through a lot of omissions, editing, and recreation. Then, if you travel to a distant place to create a simple daily life, smell the forest, see the leaves swaying in the autumn wind, sense the falling leaves, and listen to the bird songs, you might think and ask yourself whether many things are omitted or distorted while you are standing on the time that passed through your daily life. Also, Christopher showed us a well-preserved skeleton of a dog buried about 8,000 years ago. It was buried next to the entrance of the house. It was laying on a bed of feathers, and had small gifts laying on top of its body. It reminded me of my dog that was buried in the ground 3 years ago. Now it's 4 years ago. The day was special because all the family members were at home at the same time. My dog had not been able to move herself. Suddenly, I noticed that she was breathing unsteadily and losing focus in her eyes. We were next to her, crying and saying the things we wanted to say. Thank you and I love you. Then, yeah. Then when we stopped breathing, she stopped breathing for a few seconds, I shouted her name and then she exhaled her last breath. I remember her last long breath following. My voice, after hearing her last breath and her last answer, we led her with care and buried her with toys and she loved beyond a long time. Human beings live their daily life and we love. Yeah, I'm thinking my thoughts. So emotional. Yeah, it was great time.
Thank you.
You made me cry. Oh, thank you. Well, my experience, I think it was fascinating to, because I've been to Blekinge very much in my life. It's where my mother is from, and I live there in parts. Um, so it's always fascinating inviting people that is not from there or not been there to see it in a new way. I think that is what I bring with me the most. Also the experience, because in in my perspective, I have always traveled south to Blekinge. So for me, Blekinge is the south, but this was the first time I traveled north to Blekinge. And for all of you, Blekinge, it was in the north. But for me, I always thought about this in the south. So it was this change. So that sort of related to this change of perspective. And also, yes, see things that surprised you. I remember the female priest that surprised some of you. I thought that was fun. Also, the presence of the military, especially in the city. I think you, Vicky, mentioned it once that you were surprised by it. And then I was like, yeah, it's actually very strange. What more? Um, mm, it was it was beautiful to cook together that much. It's so simple, but it was fun. Or like fun in a way that not only like fun, it was also felt like it was in those moments that we sort of, or I at least felt I was thinking the best. Like when you do something when you do something when you're not supposed to be thinking really, and then you start thinking, like cooking or eating, or that moment on the bus when you had a saw the resemblance between the stone carvings and the eel catching tools. That I think was fascinating. But maybe we should take a moment now to like, because there's the box, and so we have one person going to show the website a little bit more for the online people and the online streaming, and then people here can dig in a little bit in the box. Yes, Sebastian. Yeah.
I mean, especially you, do you feel like the host or the guest of the island?
Of the, I think I felt like a host. Yes, I was very aware that what I wanted to show in a way, or like how to make these days into a experience. And as Elisa said, I had given all of you and also myself an island that sort of I thought would resemble or be a parallel to the practice. So I felt like a host. But it was also because I was visiting, coming back. I was also a guest. Maybe, yeah. We can also bring the box down here. Yeah, should we do it? Yeah, let's stand up and move a bit.
Shall I show it or make like a little?
Yeah, do you want to? Yeah,
I don't know.
I can also do it.
Is anyone connected? Oh yeah.
On the cover maybe?
Well, we have the box and it has different booklets and posters and also, so here's one booklet. Yeah. There's stories on the CD. There. Yeah, we had like
We have text and stories, and Heaven has a very nice Korean song. And then, so these are like 2 nights we did, no, like 2 evenings that we're just. Is it one? Okay, I got lost in time. Yeah, yeah, but then for me it's midnight. So for me it's really like a super midnight story. But we also had a live stream on Instagram at that time. But then these are all the audio recordings of what we shared that night. And it's also on the archive, no? The bedtime stories. Yeah. So it's on the website. I think the website, if you have time, you really should dig in. I think it's beautiful design and very organized. And I think the timeline. No, it's true. The timeline. Go to the page of the timeline schedule because that was super impressive. Really, like program. The second one. Isn't it beautiful? Yeah. So basically, I guess we explore so many different forms of like the box, the website, the online drive archive, and the text. I think it's just amazing how all these things transform every time we put them in a new format, and you basically see a different. You can have like a total different experience when you look at like a linear timeline and when you look at the box. And I think it's very much like, yeah. And then there's the cookbook where they share recipes that you have actually cooked in the house, in the little wooden house in the place they stayed.
actually nice to go through this one. Yeah, then there's postcards with pictures. There's 2 USB sticks with soundscape recordings. So, like the ocean, for instance. The ocean. Do you see this? Yeah. Oh, not really. Yeah. Some gingers from Sharp Island in Hong Kong. Next to a submarine. Because Syrian's Islands is famous because a Soviet submarine grounded there during the Cold War. And it was a big fuss. And then I have more interesting things. Then this was on the way to Elisa's Island, and the water was very high at that moment, so we had to walk through it or on it if you have that capability, which some of us have. No kidding. Blessed. One more. Haven drawing. The fire, yeah, during the time there, we sort of cut down the electric. So we heated the house and with wood, which I like a lot because I think the warmth from wood is more round in the sense of experience, but otherwise it's a bit sharp and cold. It's still warm, but it's like dry. This is the bedtime stories event in like a quick time lapse, so you can click on it. It's a 10-second. dog, stone. Yeah, we invited one of my neighbors who's a lecturer on the right to housing, uh, to have a lecture on about his research. Tim Holapa. So, and Elisa and Tim had a discussion. And then we entered the making of the box. But anyways, we prepared here, these abstract shapes should resemble sort of concept, like idea, in an idea, some of the rocks in Hästhallen, which is like the Hall of Horses, which is where the stone carvings I wanted to show them are. It's in like the center of this big peninsula of their archipelago, of the eastern archipelago. It's and on the highest point of it. And I go there, no, every time I go back there or go back home, because it has it has a soothing, strange energy, I find. And they are red because bothly so you can see them, and because I don't know, maybe an archaeologist will be angry at me now. I do believe that they at some have found small traces of animal blood, so that they do believe that that's how they colored it. And in this place, there's like interpretations or even explanations of what the different carvings mean. Some are quite concrete, and like this shape over here, that's like a U with lines. It's supposed to be a boat, and then the lines are people. That's a very common belief that's very established. And then you have this line with two lines, a circle, and then a little line, sort of like it's supposed to be some kind of male figure, is believed. But then there were some, and then the circle with a dot is interpreted as the sun normally. Some circles with a line to it is supposed to be interpreted as a foot, and then as a self-portrait. And then so they are more or less abstract. And then there's this shape of this place that they only found in this place. So most of these shapes you can find in other stone carving places or halls, but not this figure. And they called it this figure. They call it the worm figure. And the interpretation was something like a boat carrying the sun. But I think when we visited it, we were like, really, a boat? Because it's like this. And then, yeah. And then, like, I think it was the day after we went to the Blekinge Museum. And then we saw this huge gathering of tools from different times. And because it's an archipelago region, fishing has always been very present. So maybe we find some of the tools that we saw. And also pictures. So here's some of the eel fishing tools. And those up there. And then Elisa said on the bus, it kind of looks like the stone carvings, you know, the U shape with the lines. And also that some of the stone carvings doesn't have the ending back. It's just shoot and then carvings. So then, and then suddenly we thought about this worm figure that is unknown what it means, this weird boat that's supposed to carry the sound, and we said maybe just that is the eel. And Haven, from her experience in Korea, also imagined that this dot that is in the middle of the circle of the worm figure, because when you cut open an eel, you can take a knife in the head and then cut it, so that the dot would be more like an instruction. Like you put the dot there and then you pull it, and then the eel is a little bit like this. So it kind of looks more like the worm figure. And then Haven started to use her like. Do you want to explain what you did? Like use your artistic drawing and just trying to redraw and imagine what it could have been.
When I start to imagine the scenery, I just follow the line and then think the people in the past. It's so realistic actually in where we are going to back to the Hague in the train. We imagined and we talked, and then suddenly I come up the experience in the past when I fishing with my father. We we take to the some point with the what is that nets, and then we go the work through that the nets. But yeah, so it's this drawing is something like the scenery. So people go to this side and yes.
If you see it.
Yes, people go to the bring to the to nets to the eels to the nets, and then wait the people in the nets and then catch the eels. So the way is to bring to the eels to the nets, how it works. But yeah, the scenery imagined in my mind actually. Yes, kind of.
Yeah. I thought also this that I thought it's so telling in a way. There's the man figure that was supposed to have the phallos symbol, the big dick. Why can't it just be? It can just be a foot, the leg. Why do we have to interpret this as a dick? Well, I think it's genius. And we had this idea that we would try to do the same thing here, because maybe it's not eels, maybe it's something else, or maybe there's more shapes here that could be other things connected to eels. So we have pens, we have the shapes on the floor, we have each other. We can do it.
I think the idea now is to have you participate as well, and we were thinking on doing perhaps some reading and drawing circle. So maybe if we take the boxes again, and then you can take some pens, sit around the little islands with the drawings, and also while we are going to read together, I think we also count on your voices. I think it's sort of well-known text now by Ursula K. Le Guin, which is the career bag theory of fiction. And I think it's nice if we all can bring into voices, like read out loud paragraphs together, because it's after all how for many, many millennia texts were shared. It wasn't just reading individually, but it was also reading them out loud and sharing them. And that was the way of thinking and of experiencing texts and reading. So maybe If you want, we can also do that. We have some copies here. You can have a few and then also sit around. And I think it's all about making questions, thinking, speculating a little bit, drawing. You can draw whatever you want. And then for the online people, now I'm going to send you a link on the chat. So online people, if you click this link I have just sent you, oops, you can enter as a visitor, you don't have to log in. You will enter this some sort of mural board, and here is, you can also participate drawing if you want. So you can click the draw icon, and then you get a pencil, and then you can do whatever you want with us. And then done drawing, and it will remain here. So we can do that together. Oh yeah, and the text is also available on the Drive folder, on the text folder. I will send a link. But you can start.
So yeah, the text will be there. The carrier bag theory of fiction, 1986. In the temperate and tropical regions where it appears that hominids evolved into human beings, the principal food of the species was vegetable. 65 to 80% of what human beings ate in those regions in the Paleolithic and Neolithic and prehistoric times was gathered. Only in the extreme Arctic was meat the staple food. The mammoth hunters spectacularly occupied the cave wall and the mind. But what we actually did to stay alive and fat was gathered seeds. But what we actually did to stay alive and fat was gathered seeds. Roots, sprouts, shoots, leaves, nuts, berries, fruits, and grains. Adding bugs and mollusks and netting or snaring birds, fish, rats, rabbits, and other tuskless small fry to up the protein. And we didn't even work hard at it, much less hard than peasants slaving in somebody else's field after agriculture was invented, much less hard than paid workers since civilization was invented. The average prehistoric person could make a nice living in about 15-hour work week. 15 hours a week for subsistence leaves a lot of time for other things. So much time that maybe the restless ones who didn't have a baby around to enliven their life or skill in making or cooking or singing or very interesting thoughts to think, decided to slope off and hunt mammoths. The skillful hunters then would come staggering back with a load of meat, a lot of ivory, and a story. It wasn't the meat that made the difference, it was the story. It is hard to tell a real gripping tale of how I wrested a wild oat seed from its husk, and then another, and then another, and then another, and then another, and then I scratched my gnat bites and Ul said something funny, and we went to Creek and got a drink. Got a drink and watched Nevs, Nevs for a while, and then I found another patch of oats. No, it does not compare. It cannot compete with how I thrust my spear deep into the titanic hairy flank while Oob, impaled on one huge sweeping tusk, writhed, screaming, and blood spouted everywhere in crimson torrents, and Bob Bob was crushed to jelly when the mammoth fell on him as I shot my unerring arrow straight through eye to brain. Yes, that's more fascinating. That story not only has action, it has a hero. Heroes are powerful before you know it. The men and women in the wild oat patch and their kids, and the skills of the makers and the thoughts of the thoughtful and the songs of the singers are all part of it. Have all been pressed into service in the tale of the hero. But it isn't their story, it's his. Okay, I will read one more paragraph and then I will hand it over. It's nice to read though, but it's struggling. when she was planning the book, when she was planning the book that ended up as 3 guineas, Virginia Woolf wrote a heading in her notebook, glossary. She had thought of reinventing English according to a new plan. In order to tell a different story, one of the entries in this glossary is heroism, defined as botulism, and hero involves dictionary is bottle. The hero as bottle, a stringent re-evaluation. I now propose the bottle as hero. Not just the bottle of gin or wine, but bottle in its older sense of container in general, a thing that holds something else. Okay. Do you wanna?
If you haven't got something to put in, food will escape you, even something as uncombative and unresourceful as an oat. You put as many as you can into your stomach while they are handy, that being the primary container. But what about tomorrow morning when you wake up and it's cold and raining, and wouldn't it be good when to have just a few handfuls of oats to chew on and give a little to make her shut up? But how do you get more than one stomachful and one handful home? So you get up and go to the damned soggy oat patch in the rain, and wouldn't it be a good thing if you had something to put a baby ooh-ooh in so that you could pick the oats with both hands? A leaf, a gourd, a shell, a net, a bag, a sling, a sack, a bottle, a pot, a box, a container, a holder, a recipient. The first cultural device was probably a recipient. Many theorizers feel that the earliest cultural inventions must have been a container to hold gathered products and some kind of sling or net carrier. So says Elizabeth Fisher in Women's Creation. But no, this cannot be. Where is that wonderful, big, long, hard thing, a bone? I believe that the ape man first bashed somebody in the movie and then grunting with ecstasy at having achieved the first proper murder, flung up into the sky and whirling there it became a spaceship thrusting its way into the cosmos to fertilize it and produce it at the end of the movie, a lovely fetus, a boy, of course, drifting around the Milky Way without, oddly enough, any womb, any matrix at all? I don't know. I don't even care. I'm not telling that story. We've heard it. We've all heard all about all the sticks and spears and swords, the things to bash people, uh, the things to bash and poke and hit with the long, hard things. But we have not heard about the thing to put things in, the container for the thing contained. That is a new story. That is news. And yet old. Before, once you think about it, surely long before, the weapon, a late luxurious superfluous tool, long before the useful knife and axe, right along with the indispensable whacker, grinder and digger, for what's the use of digging up a lot of potatoes if you have nothing to lug the ones you can't eat home in? With or before the tool that forces energy outward, we made the tool that brings energy home. It makes sense to me. I'm an adherent of what Fisher calls the carrier bag theory of human evolution.
Serene, do you wanna?
Where is it? Where did you stop? Saying a recipient, right? I think so. The first no. Did we stop here? Hey? Say it again. The theory not only explains large areas of theoretical obscurity and avoids large areas of theoretical nonsense, inhabited largely by tigers, foxes, and other highly territorial mammals. It is also grounded it also grounds me personally in human culture in a way I never felt grounded before. So long as culture was explained as originating from and elaborating upon the use of long, hard objects for sticking, bashing, and killing, I never thought that I had or wanted any particular share in it. What Freud mistook for her lack of civilization is women's lack of loyalty to civilization, Lillian Smith observed. The society, the civilization they were talking about, these theoreticians were evidently theirs. They owned it, they liked it, they were human, fully human, bashing, staking, thrusting, killing. Wanting to be human too, I sought for evidence that I was, but if that's what it took to make a weapon and kill with it, then evidently I was either extremely defective as a human being or not human at all. That's right, they said. What you are is a woman, possibly not human at all, certainly defective. Now be quiet while we go on telling the story of the essence of man the hero. Go on, say I, wandering off towards the wild oats, with O in the sling and little carrying the basket. You just go on telling how the mammoth fell on Boob, and how Cain fell on Abel, and how the bomb fell on Nagasaki, and how the burning jelly fell on the villages, and how the missiles will fall on the evil empire, and all the other steps in the essence of man. If it is a human thing to do to put something you want, because it's useful, edible, or beautiful, into a bag or a basket, or a bit of road bark or leaf, or a net woven of your own hair, or what have you, and then take it home with you, home being an other larger kind of pouch or bag, a container for people. And then later on you take it out and eat it, or share it, or store it up for winter in a soldier container, or put it in the medicine bundle, or the shrine, or the museum, the holy place, the area that contains what is sacred, and then the next day you probably do much the same again. If to do that is human, if that's what it takes, then I am a human being after all, fully, freely, gladly, for the first time. Not, let it be said at once, an unaggressive or incompatible human being. I'm an aging, angry woman laying mightily about me with my handbag, fighting home loops off. However, I don't, nor does anybody else, consider myself heroic of doing so. It's just one of those damn things you have to do in order to be able to go on gathering wild oats and telling other stories. It is the story that makes the difference. It is the story that hid my humanity from me. The story the memo of hunters told about bashing, thrusting, raping, killing, about the hero. The wonderful, poisonous stories of brutalism, the killer story. It sometimes seems that the story is approaching its end. Lest there be no more telling of stories at all. Some of us out here in the wild oats, amidst the alien corn, think we'd better start telling another one, which maybe people can go on with when the old one's finished. Maybe. The trouble is, we've all let ourselves become part of the killer story, and so we might get finished along with it. Hence, it is with a certain feeling of urgency that I seek the nature, subject, words of the other story, the untold one, the life story.
It's unfamiliar. It doesn't come easily, thoughtlessly to the lips as the killer story does. But still, untold was an exaggeration. People have been telling the life story for ages in all sorts of words and ways. Myths of creation and transformation, trickster stories, folk tales, jokes, novels. The novel is a fundamentally unheroic kind of story. Of course, the hero has frequently taken it over, that being his imperial nature and uncontrollable impulse, to take everything over and run it while making stern decrees and laws to control his uncontrollable impulse, to kill it. So the hero has decreed through his mouthpieces, the lawgivers, first, that the proper shape of the narrative is that of the arrow or spear, starting here and going straight there, and talk, hitting its mark, which drops death. Second, that the central concern of narrative, including the novel, is conflict. And third, that the story isn't any good if he isn't in it. I differ with all of this. I would go so far as to say that the natural, proper, fitting shape of the novel might be that of a sack, a bag. A book holds words. Words hold things. They bear meanings. A novel is a medicine bundle, holding things in a particular, powerful relation to one another and to us. One relationship among elements in the novel may well be that of conflict, but the reduction of narrative to conflict is absurd. I have read a How to Write manual that said a story should be seen as a battle, and went on about strategies, attacks, victory, etc. Conflict, competition, stress, struggle, within the narrative conceived as career bag, belly, box, house, medicine, bundle, may be seen as necessary elements of a whole which itself cannot be characterized either as conflict or as a harmony, since its purpose is neither resolution nor stasis, but continuing process. Finally, it's clear that the hero does not look well in this bag. He needs a stage or a pedestal or a pinnacle. You put him in a bag and he looks like a rabbit, like a potato. That is why I like novels. Instead of heroes, they have people in them. So when I came to write science fiction novels, I came lodging this great heavy sack of stuff, my carrier bag full of whims and klutzes, and tiny grains of things smaller than a mustard seed. And intricately woven nets with then, when laboriously unnoted, are seen to contain one blue pebble, an imperturbably functioning chronometer telling the time on another world, and a master's school, full of beginnings without ends, of initiations, of losses, of transformations and translations, and far more tricks than conflicts, far fewer triumphs than snares and delusions, full of spaceships that get stuck, missions that fail, and people who don't understand. I said it was hard to make a gripping tale of how we wrestled the wild oats from their husk. I didn't say it was impossible. Whoever said writing a novel was easy? If science fiction is the mythology of modern technology, then its myth is tragic. Technology, or modern science, using the words as they are usually used, is an unexamined shorthand, standing for the bomb fell on Nagasaki and how the burning jelly fell on the villagers and how the missiles will fall on the evil empire, and all the other steps in the ascent of man. Someone else wants to keep going? Okay. Where we are? Here, if it's a human thing.
Oh, the ceramic. If it's a human thing to do, to put something you want because it's useful, edible, or beautiful into a bag or a basket. Hey, didn't we already read this? Or is it just repeating? Okay. Into a bag or a basket or a bit of rolled bark or leaf or a net woven of your own hair or what have you, and then take it home with you, home being another larger kind of pouch or bag, a container for people. And then later on you take it out and eat it or share it or store it up for winter in a solider container or put it in the medicine bundle or the shrine or the museum, the holy place, the area that contains what is sacred. And then next day you probably do much the same again. If to do that is human. Yeah, did we already read this? Yeah, we did. Where were we? Oh yeah, okay. Sorry. So when I came to write science fiction novels, I came lugging this great heavy sack of stuff, my carrier bag full of wimps and klotzes, and tiny grains of things smaller than a mustard seed, and intricately woven nets, which when laboriously unknotted, are seen to contain one blue pebble, an imperturbably and functioning chronometer telling the time of another world, and a mouse's skull full of beginnings without ends, of initiations, of losses, of transformations and translations, and far more tricks than conflicts, far fewer triumphs than snares and delusions, full of spaceships that get stuck, missions that fail, and people who don't understand. I said it was hard to make a gripping tale of how we wrestled the wild oats from their husks. We already read this too. Where are we? I didn't say it was impossible. Oh, really? Okay. It's nice to re-emphasize. I don't know. Or maybe here. If science fiction is the mythology of modern technology, then its myth is tragic. Technology or modern science, using the words as they are usually used, in an unexamined shorthand standing for the hard sciences and high technology founded upon continuous economic growth, is a heroic undertaking. Herculean, Promethean, conceived as triumph, hence ultimately as tragedy. The fiction embodying this myth will be and has been triumphant. Man conquers Earth, space, aliens, death, the future, etc. And tragic. Apocalypse, Holocaust, then or now.
Finish it.
If, however, one avoids the linear, progressive, time-killing arrow mode of the techno-heroic and redefines technology and science as primarily cultural carrier bag rather than weapon of domination, one pleasant side effect is that science fiction can be seen as a far less rigid, narrow field, not necessarily Promethean or apocalyptic at all, and in fact less a mythological genre than a realistic one. It is a strange realism, but it is a strange reality. Science fiction, properly conceived, like all serious fiction, however funny, is a way of trying to describe what is in fact going on, what people actually do and feel, how people relate to everything else in this vast sack, this belly of the universe, this womb of things to be and tomb of things that were, this unending story. In it, as in all fiction, there is room enough to keep even man where he belongs, in his place, in the scheme of things. There is time enough to gather plenty of wild oats and sow them too, and sing to little and listen to Ul's joke, and watch nudes, and still the story isn't over. Still there are seeds to be gathered and room in the bag of stars.
So now time for questions. If anyone has questions or reflections. Mm. It's yeah, I can't tell. I'm sorry. No, it's just that it's because it's southeast of Sweden, and for long it's been the naval base of Sweden. So it has a long military presence of that sense, in that sense. Because yeah, during the Swedish Empire, the king wanted it to be the capital and then wanted it to be Maine, because when the naval was in Stockholm, some winters when the ocean froze, they couldn't access they couldn't exit. So then the Danish always won the war because the fleet was up in Stockholm in frozen. So then he wanted to move it down to the south where it was less likely for it to freeze. So then the naval ended there. And then for long it's been very militarized. So like the Karlskrona, which is the biggest city, sort of like, I don't know, half or 40%. There's like a wall going through it that divides the city. So you have the military part that you can't enter, and then the civilian part. And before, during the Cold War, all the islands where we go, if you have the map, I might say facts wrong because I'm not a historian, but all the islands, or most of the islands, you couldn't go out there if you weren't Swedish. You had to have a Swedish passport. So there was also this fear or suspicion to foreigners there. So that's the military presence. Because it's one of the main bases of the fleet, and also because it's southeast. It's in Swedish perspective. It's close to Poland and Kaliningrad, so maybe also has strategical reasons. Yeah. But now right now it's the NATO debate is going on at home, so maybe it's changing now. We will see how it will be. Any other?
There was a mark. You cannot dip it,
Yeah.
and you cannot take a picture. But I dip it in my painting.
Yeah.
You
You
can
even took pictures.
yeah,
Yeah. Or describe.
yeah.
It's
That's a place.
Yes, but
And what was there to see there? What
yes.
can you tell?
the nature.
Yeah.
Yeah, so normally my work is related with that situation. Yeah, I'm from South Korea, so we have also military spaces. In the border, you cannot take a picture, you cannot go enter. So I drew the landscape to painting, and then when I saw these landscapes, also I was interested, so I drew these landscapes in my painting. So yeah, you can see, yeah, through the painting, not picture. Yeah.
I wanted to ask about the title, which is, I think it's really nice. I don't know, just is there something else you can say about birds and how was the experience with them?
Yeah.
Doing the experience or something?
Yeah. Yeah, now it's been very eel-focused, less than birds. But we started with the birds. I think because it was during the autumn when the birds migrate, and this region, and especially the southeast of the region, is where a lot of birds pass over the Baltics, or when some of the gooses in Siberia should cross to somewhere else in Europe to sort of land there. So when I've been in this in my house during autumn or spring, but especially autumn, I found there's a huge amount of birds passing. It's very, especially the cranes, because they're big and they make this special sound. And I also remember that when the last sort of, you don't say herd, it's not a herd of cranes, it's like a flock of cranes. I remember when the last one passes, it always feels so sad, because then there's silence and you feel well, personally I always feel strange in an environment when like all the animals, if it's like all the animals are leaving but you're staying, and you sort of have this feeling that maybe you also should leave because the winter is coming. And so should I leave? Because you see then you're like bye bye. Oh bye bye. um, so we thought about that, and that we would then do the opposite movement. We would go from here upwards, and don't yeah, and don't fly, and try to take the train or buses. Do we have any more smart ideas why we do the subtitles? No.
I think it was just sort of it started as a joke.
Mm.
Because we didn't want to fly, but then the journey took so long. It took the whole night, which is it's not that long. Sorry. No, but I think the birds were quite present through the week, or at least I searched for them. I should.
Yeah, you should have this. I can. Sorry.
Yeah, I was saying that the birds were quite present during the week, and that at least I was searching for them a lot, and we found quite a lot of dead birds on one walk, Senia and me. Yeah, and then there was the prospect of would the cranes be there, and they weren't, but there were lots of ganzen. Geese. Yeah, and before we went, I also sent a small box to the house with 6 birds taking a train, and it arrived. We hoped it would arrive when we were there, but it ended up arriving much later. So it was lost a while in the post as well. I think at least because it took such a long time. And then we did receive a message from a family member of Xenia that it did arrive. Yeah, birds.
How long have we left? 35?
About 25 minutes.
35 minutes.
Maybe you can do the bedtime stories.
Yeah. Or any other questions, ideas? No. On online people, you can write if you have any questions, and we can attend to it after the bedtime stories.
Was one of the objectives of the residents to actually interact with the inhabitants of the islands, or was it pure nature?
It was mostly natures, and on a lot of the islands, not many people living anymore. A lot of the houses are used to as summer houses, partly because of the infrastructure and of the life that you would be able to make living there. It's someone who lives in a city and could use it as a summer house can bid higher than if someone who wants to live there and, I don't know, fish. But I guess these days you can also live there and work remotely online. But except my neighbor, Tim Holapa, the researcher, and except Christopher, the staff at the museum, and yeah, a few people that we ran into. We went to the closest village that my sort of village is part of. We went to Lena, she has a cafe, so she made us a traditional way of sandwich. And that's where we saw also this female priest. Yeah.
There's a cookbook in the box.
Yeah. Rosa, you wanted to read, right? Ronja? Mostel can come also. We have a dog in the room. Alive. Morsel, which means musla in Swedish. So we're going to read from Ronja Rövardotter, which Ronja Roberts' daughter, which was we of some reason we started to watch it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Ronja Roberts' daughter. It's from Astrid Lindgren. I think we talked about it. I had seen it. I also read the book already, and then we watched it together. And yeah, like we said before, we did a bedtime story, so reading for each other when it got dark. So we thought as a ending to the evening or to this event, we would also read you a story before bedtime, which is Ronja. 1. On the night that Ronja was born, a thunderstorm was raging over the mountains. Such a storm that all the goblin folk in Mat's forest crept back in terror to their holes and hiding places. Only the fierce harpies preferred stormy weather to any other and flew, shrieking and hooting, around the robber's stronghold on Mat's mountain. Their noise disturbed Dovis, who was lying within, preparing to give birth, and she said to Mat, "Drive the hell harpies away and let me have some quiet, otherwise I can't hear what I'm singing." The fact was that Lovis liked to sing when she was having her baby. It made things easier, she insisted, and the baby would probably be all the jollier if it arrived on Earth to the sound of a song. Oh, sorry, my e-reader is slow. Hello.
Page not found.
Yes. Okay, page found. Mutt took his crossbow and shot off a few arrows through one of the arrow slits in the fort. "Be off with you, harpies," he shouted. "I'm going to have a baby tonight. Get that into your heads, you hags." "Ho, ho, he's gonna have a baby tonight," hooted the harpies. "A thunder and lightning baby, small and ugly it will be, ho, ho." Then Mutt shot again, straight into the flock. But they simply jeered at him and flew off across the treetops, hooting angrily. While Lovis lay there, giving birth and singing, and while Mutt quelled the wild harpies as best he could, his robbers were sitting by the fire down in the great stone hall. Maybe she should come here. Oh, you want to read?
Where are you? Stone hall. Okay. His robbers were sitting by the fire down in the great stone hall, eating and drinking and behaving as rowdily as the harpies themselves. After all, they had to do something while they waited, and all 12 of them were waiting for what was about to happen up there in the tower room. No child had ever been born in Matt's fort in all their robber days there. Noddle Pete was waiting most of all. That robber baby had better come soon, he said. I'm old and rickety, and my robbing days will soon be over. It will be fine to see a new robber chief here before I'm finished. He had scarcely stopped speaking when the door opened and Matt rushed in, quite witless with delight. He raced all the way around the hall, leaping high. Oh, no.
Page not found.
Again. Technology. Yeah, that's better. Sorry for the technical problem. I feel like a parody on a Swedish person who reads Ronja Roberts' daughter.
Should I continue? Yeah. Where did you stop?
I
Here?
stopped, raced all the way around the hall, leaping high.
He raced all the way around the hall, leaping high with joy and shrieking like a madman. "I've got a child, do you hear me? I've got a child." "What sort of child is it?" asked Noddle Pete over in his corner. "A robber's daughter, joy and gladness," shouted Mutt. "A robber's daughter, here she comes." And over the high threshold stepped Lovis with her baby in her arms. All the robber's noise turned off at once. "I do believe that's made your beer go down the wrong way," said Mutt. He took the baby girl from Lovis and carried her around among the robbers. "Here, want to see the most beautiful child ever born in a robber's fort?" His daughter lay there in his arms, looking up at him with wide, bright eyes. "That child understands just about everything already. You can see that," said Mutt. "What will you call her?" asked Noddle Pete. "Ronja," said Lovis. "I decided that a long time ago." "What if it had been a boy?" asked Noddle Pete. Lovis gave him a calm, stern look. If I decide my baby is to be called Ronja, it will be a Ronja. Then she turned to Matt. Shall I take her now? But Matt did not want to hand over his daughter. He stood there gazing in admiration at her clear eyes, her little mouth, her black tufts of hair, her helpless hands, and he trembled with love. You, baby, you're already holding my robber's heart in those little hands, he said. I don't understand it, but that's how it is. Could I hold her for a bit? Noddlepete asked. And Matt laid Ranja in his arms as if she were a golden egg. I give you the new robber chieftain you've been talking about all this time. Don't drop her, whatever you do, or it will be your last hour. But Noddlepete just smiled his toothless smile at Ronja. There's no real weight to her, he said, surprised, raising and lowering her a couple of times. That made Matt angry, and he snatched his baby back. What did you expect, numbskull? A great fat robber chieftain with a bulging belly and a pointed beard, eh? All the robbers realized then that there must be no comments about this child if they wanted to keep Matt in a good mood, and it really was not wise to annoy him. So they set to work at once, praising and extolling the newborn baby. They also emptied a great many tankards of beer in her honor, which made Matt happy. He threw himself down on his high seat among them and showed off his remarkable child again and again. This is going to plague the life out of Borka, said Matt. He can sit there in his miserable robber's den and gnash his teeth with jealousy. Yes, death and destruction. There will be such a gnashing that all the wild harpies and great dwarfs in Borka's wood will hold their ears, believe me. Noddlepete nodded gleefully and said with a little snigger, Sure enough, it will plague the life out of Borka. Now Matt's line will live on, but Borka's line will be finished and done for. Yes, said Matt, finished and done for, sure as death. As far as I know, Borka has not managed to get a child and is not likely to either. Then came a crack of thunder, the like of which had never been heard in Matt's wood before. It made even the robbers turn pale, and Noddlepete fell flat on his back, weak as he was. A piteous little cry came unexpectedly from Ronja that shook Matt worse than the thunderclap. My child is crying, he shrieked. What do we do? What do we do? But Lovis was standing by calmly. She took the baby from him and put her to her breast, and there was no more crying. That was a good crack, said Noddlepete, when he too had calmed down a little. I'll take my dying oath in struck. Yes, the lightning had struck, and in earnest too, as they saw when morning came. The ancient fortress high up on Matt's mountain had been cleft down the middle. From the highest battlements to the deepest vault of the dungeons, the fortress was now split in two halves with a chasm between them. Ronja, your young life has gotten off to a grand start, said Lovis, as she stood by the shattered wall with the baby in her arms, looking at the disaster. Matt was raging like a wild animal. How could this have been allowed to happen to his forefathers' old fortress? But Matt could not go on being angry about anything for long, and he could always find reasons to take comfort. Oh, well, we shan't have so many twists and turns and cellar pits and rubbish to keep track of, and perhaps no one will need to get lost in Matt's fort anymore. Remember what it was like when Noddlepete went astray and didn't turn up for 4 days? Noddlepete did not enjoy being reminded of this occasion. Was it his fault he had gotten lost? He had only been trying to find out how vast and rambling Matt's fort really was, and had indeed found it big enough to get lost in. Poor thing, he was almost half dead before he finally found his way back to the great stone hall. Thank goodness the robbers had been bawling and kicking up enough noise for him to hear them a long way off, otherwise he would never have gotten back. In any case, we have never used the whole fort, said Matt, and we will go on living in our hall and bedrooms and tower rooms where we have always lived. The only thing that annoys me is that we have lost our outhouse. Yes, death and destruction, it's on the other side of the chasm now, and I'm sorry for anyone who can't contain himself until we manage to build a new one. But that was soon dealt with, and life in Matt's fort went on exactly as before, except that now there was a child there. A little child who succeeded bit by bit in sending Matt and all his robbers more or less mad, in Lovis's view. Now that it hurt them to become a little gentler-handed and milder-mannered, but there should be moderation in all things. And it really was strange to see 12 robbers and one robber chieftain sitting there like a lot of sheep, beaming and blissful just because a small child had learned to crawl around the stone hall, as if there had never been a greater miracle on earth. It was true that Ronja scampered about unusually fast because she had a tick of pushing off with her left foot, which the robbers thought absolutely astounding. But, after all, most children do learn to crawl, as Lovis said, without loud cheers and without their father seeing it as a reason to forget everything else and positively neglect his work. "Do you want Borka to take over all the robbing in Mat's forest as well?" she asked sharply when the robbers, with Mat at their head, came storming home early just because they had to see Ronja eating her porridge before Lovis put her into her hanging cradle for the night. But Mat had no ears for such talk. "Ronja mine, my little pigeon," he shouted, as Ronja, shoving hard with her left foot, came shooting across the floor towards him as soon as he walked in the door. And he sat with his little pigeon on his knee and fed her porridge while his 12 brothers looked on. The porridge bowl was standing on the hearth at arm's reach, and as Mat was rather clumsy with his rough robber's fists, a lot of porridge got spilled on the floor, and Ronja knocked the spoon from time to time so that a good deal of porridge also flew onto Mat's eyebrows. The first time it happened, the robbers laughed so uproariously that Ronja was fighting and began to cry. But she soon realized that she had hit on something amusing to do, and did it again, which delighted the robbers more than it amused Mat. Otherwise, Mat thought that everything Ronja did was incomparable and that she herself had not her equal on earth. Even Lovis had to laugh when she saw Mat sitting there with his child on his knee and porridge on his eyebrows. "My dear Mat, who would ever think that you were the most powerful robber chieftain in all the woods and mountains? If Borka saw you now, he would split his sides laughing." "I would soon put a stop to that," Mat said calmly. Borka was the arch-enemy, just as Borka's father and grandfather had been the arch-enemies of Mat's father and grandfather. Yes, since time immemorial the Borkas and the Mats had been at loggerheads. They had always been robbers and a terror to decent folk who had to pass with their horses and wagons through the deep forests where the robbers lurked. "God help anyone whose way lies along Robber's Walk," people said, talking of the narrow mountain pass between Borka's Wood and Mat's Wood. There were always robbers on the lookout there, and whether they were Borka's robbers or Mat's robbers made little difference, at least to those who were robbed. But to Mat and Borka the difference was enormous. They fought for their lives over the booty and even robbed each other without hesitation if there were enough merchants passing through Robber's Walk. Ronja knew nothing of all this. She was too young. She did not know that her father was a feared robber chieftain. To her, he was just the kind, bearded Mat who laughed and sang and shouted and gave her porridge and whom she loved. But she was growing up every day as soon as she began to explore the world around her. For a long time she had believed that the great stone hall was the whole world, and she liked it there. She was safe sitting under the great long table, playing with pebbles and pine cones that Mat brought home to her. And the stone hall was not a bad place for a child. You could have great fun there, and you could learn a lot. Ronja liked it when the robbers sang around the fire in the evenings. She sat quietly under the table listening until she knew all the robbers' ditties by heart. Then she joined in, her voice clear as a bell. And Mat was astonished at his matchless child who sang so well. She taught herself to dance too. If the robbers were in the mood, they would dance and leap around the room like madmen, and Ronja soon saw what to do. She danced and bounded and made robbers leap as well, to Mat's delight, and when afterwards the robbers threw themselves down at the long table to slake their thirst with a tankard of beer, he bragged about his daughter. "She's as beautiful as a wild harpy, I would have you know, as subtle, as dark-eyed, and as black-haired. You never saw such a splendid child in your lives, I would have you know." And the robbers nodded and agreed with him, but Ronja sat silently under the table with her pebbles and pine cones, and when she saw the robbers' feet in their shaggy fur slippers, she pretended that they were her unruly goats. She had seen some in the goat's shed where Lovis took her when she did the milking. But Ronja had seen little more than this during her short life. She knew nothing of what lay outside Mat's fort, and one fine day Mat realized, however little he liked it, that the time had come. Lovis, he said to his wife, our child must learn what it's like living in Mat's forest. Let her go. Ah, so you've seen it at last, said Lovis. It would have happened long ago if I had had my way. And from then on, Ronja was free to wander at will. But first Mat had one or two things to say to her. Watch out for wild harpies and grey dwarfs and Borka robbers, he said. How will I know which are wild harpies and grey dwarfs and Borka robbers? Asked Ronja. You'll find out, Mat said. All right, said Ronja. And watch out you don't get lost in the forest, said Mat. What shall I do if I get lost in the forest? Ronja asked. Find the right path, Mat said. All right, said Ronja. And watch out you don't fall in the river, Mat said. What shall I do if I fall in the river? Ronja asked. Swim, Mat said. All right, said Ronja. And watch out you don't tumble into Hell's Gap, Mat said. He meant the chasm that split Mat's fort in two. What shall I do if I tumble into Hell's Gap? Ronja asked. You won't be doing anything else, Mat said, and then he gave a bellow as if all things evil had suddenly pierced his heart. All right, said Ronja, when Mat had finished bellowing. I shan't fall into Hell's Gap. Is there anything else? There certainly is, said Mat, but you will find out bit by bit. Go now. That was the first chapter.
Thank you. Let's see if there's any questions in the written chat online, just for ending, because I said I would look. No. Or is it? Huh? No. So then, bye. Thank you. From all of us to all of you.